This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of The Express. Indeed, Gary Allen with you. And I've got a very exciting show for us tonight. We'll get to that in just a minute. I just wanted to say thank you all very much for taking the time to join us here on The Express. I know you could be watching and listening to other programs, so I appreciate everyone who was out there listening. And Randy, I know you're there with me every week, so I thank you very, very much. Tonight we have a very exciting show. We have a young lady on. Her name is Mrs. Hughes. Now, she's a little old grandma, but she's one of the funniest ladies you're ever going to see as a comedienne. She was Merv Griffin's comedian. She worked for Merv in most of his resorts over a 5-year period. She is open for everybody from Barbara Mandrell to Brenda Lee to Lou Rawls, of which she really adored the gentleman. And for those of you that are old enough to remember, Flo and Eddy. That's the Turtles. So at any particular moment, she's also been on the Jerry Lewis Telethon, the Byron Allen Show, Craig Ferguson Show, you name it, she has been on it. She made Don Rickles laugh, which is kind of interesting. I called Eddie Mann today and told him that you were going to be on, Mrs. Hughes, because he's married to Don Rickles' daughter. So without further ado, would you please welcome, along with me, all aboard here on The Express, Mrs. Hughes. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on The Express.
Well, thank you for asking me.
Well, I felt it was only time to have you on. I had heard about you for a very long time, seen you on TV, and finally, thanks to, excuse me, our good friend Vicki Rossman, I was able to get in touch with you, and I was able to get you to come on this evening's show. Before we go anywhere, like I said, there was a number of things you said in here that you really adored Lou Rawls.
Oh, he was such a gentleman. He was so nice. He had the star dressing room. I had the dressing room across the hall with the bathroom down the way and another studio practically. But in any event, I used to eat a piece of lemon before I went on stage to get my salivary glands working. And they always brought the lemons to his dressing room. And he would come to my door, knock on the door, and that velvet voice of his, and he'd go, Mrs. Hughes, your lemons are here. I'm like, that always made me feel like, I should say, oh, never mind, don't bring, he's got other things to do besides bring me lemons. But boy, I tell you, the minute you hear that man say your name in that voice, you just get all like melted chocolate. He was so nice and so thoughtful and so wonderful. And so talented, it's just when people that famous, you don't expect them to be your friend, but he really was.
What I have found over the years, having met an awful lot of celebrities myself, the really super talented ones, the ones that are extremely gifted in their craft, and the ones that work very hard at their craft happen to be the nicest ones. The ones that are a little insecure and a little this and a little that, and you can see it in comedy clubs in particular. They're not so
absolutely
nice. Yeah, I mean, it's like dog eat dog. Let's start at the beginning.
But you know who was so funny and so nice?
What?
Merv Griffin was dating Ava Gabor, and she was so darling. And he said to me one night, he says, Ava doesn't laugh at comedy, but she thinks you're so funny that she was laying down in the booth laughing. And I just thought that was so darling. But the thing is, I met her sister, Zsa, when I was 15 in Beverly Hills. Oh. And Zsa, we were at the dime store in the makeup department. And Zsa said to me, never spend money for makeup. I always buy my makeup here at the dime store. It's always the same. It's the same. So I asked Ava about it. And she said, Merv, where did I go to buy my makeup? And Merv looks at me, rolls his eyes, and says, Walmart. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being at Walmart with all the crying children and the people in the weird clothes, and there's Ava Gabor? Oh, my God.
She was a stunning woman. She was also a business partner of Merv's, too, correct?
Not that I know of. I don't know anything about that.
Okay. And speaking of which, I told you I was going to bring this up. and it seems sort of apropos after yesterday. I had heard rumors for years. I think Trump originally owned the Beverly Hills Hilton Hotel, and then Griffin bought it from him. But I had understood, and we're not going to get into particulars, but in the business deals that he did with Trump, which he did twice, he cleaned Trump's clock.
Well, I didn't know that Trump had anything to do with the Beverly Hills Hotel. But I know that when I was working in Atlantic City, that there had been a huge dust-up about the casinos in Atlantic City.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't know that. But, that Beverly Hills Hotel, Merv remodeled it, and he did all the design himself.
Yeah.
It was what he wanted, the way he wanted it. He had so many talents, but he had fantastic taste.
He did.
And he sure knew a good comic.
Yes, he certainly did. Well, he did everything. He was a genius in business. I mean, he owned radio stations for many, many years when it used to be the old mom and pop organizations. Then he sold them. And he and his late wife, and of course Merv is gone too, both created Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. And Jeopardy was
now,
really
is Julianne no longer alive?
Yeah, they're both gone now. The only one alive is Tony.
Oh yeah. Well, Julianne was raising cats in back east here somewhere.
Yeah.
She had a trout farm.
Yeah.
And she used to make dandelion wine. She was a fascinating woman.
Oh, a genius to be married to him, because although he was very easy to get along with, my uncle, I think, had worked for him once, Tubby. But, you'd see him all the time. He was very visible. He didn't hide from the public. And he was always very, very nice, and he did put on his tombstone what he promised he would, and that is, I will not be back after this message. And that's exactly what's on his tombstone. There's nothing else, not his date of birth or death, just I will not be back after this message. It says Merv Griffin. That's it.
Where is he buried? I have to see that. That's so funny.
He's buried
was living in La Quinta.
Yeah, but he's buried in that little small cemetery in the middle of Beverly Hills, where it's 500,000.
That's where my parents. No. My mother and dad are buried there.
Yeah. The only reason I know that
is that the one where Marilyn Monroe is? Isn't that?
Oh,
no.
No. This one is.
That's in Westwood. Never mind.
Yeah, this one is in the smack dab in the middle of Beverly Hills. It's a narrow little plot of land. Carol O'Connor and his wife and son Hugh. If you ever watch In the Heat of the Night, Hugh was Jameson on the show, and he died tragically from drugs. But this is where it costs you $500,000 for the plot of land.
Right. No, I was thinking of where Marilyn Monroe is buried.
Yeah, well, she's got Hugh Hefner laying next to her now.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah,
know
that's
that.
where he was laid to rest. All right, let's get back to Mrs. Hughes. Where did this
we're talking about death. What a comedy show.
Hey, I'll tell you, lady, it's like, it's either this or that or this. When did this all begin for you? Because you didn't start until you were in your 40s.
I was 40, exactly, yes. People think I'm nuts when I tell them this, but I was watching Merv Griffin interview Phyllis Diller, and she said she started doing stand-up when she was 40, and in my head popped, oh, well, then I have plenty of time. I have no idea why I thought that, but I remember it very clearly, but I never really had an ambition to be a comedian, but I think I always knew I could. My father was a riot. He's very, very funny. And I always have these really ridiculous things, embarrassing things happen to me. And then I tell them to people at cocktail parties and stuff like that. A girlfriend of mine were invited to come to somebody's cocktail party just to spice things up because we were so funny. But I never thought about it. And then I got a job teaching a class on antiques at the Torrance, California Adult School. And actually, I didn't know anything about antiques at the time. I had gone there to ask them to have a class that I could take. And they convinced me to teach the class. And it paid $8.28 an hour. And that was a pile of money in those days. And I thought, all right, it's a 3-hour class. They fire me at the end of the first class. I still have enough money for a pair of shoes. And that was my thinking. I was so nervous that I turned bright red, and the people in the class thought that I was going to have a stroke. And I kept telling them, stop looking at me alarmed like that, because you're just going to make my face get redder. And but it turned out that I was very, very funny. Mm-hmm. And the people in the class, well, I had to do something. I didn't know anything about antiques, so I'd learned one thing, then I would be funny. And I finally, after 14 years, decided I'd rather be funny.
Yeah.
But if anybody asked me something that I didn't know, I said, well, that's out of my area of expertise, which is French furniture, the period of the Louis, which I knew nothing about, but nobody was going to bring a Louis XIV something or another to class, so.
Yeah.
I was such a phony, honest to God, but it was hysterically fun. A woman said to me one time she couldn't get the top out of a decanter. And I said, have you tried WD-40? And she said, what's that? And I said, it's a lubricant. My husband uses it all the time. And then I realized what I said. And I said, well, not all the time. And everybody started laughing. I embarrassed myself. I hid down behind the lectern, and every time I stood up to start to say something, people would start laughing again. I mean, it was just these kinds of things. I drew a picture on the blackboard of early bottles, the way the glass is made and the way the top is made.
Right.
And I just drew the top of the bottle, but it looked an awful lot like a penis. And then everything I said had some sexual overtones, like after you put the blob of glass on the top, you stick it in the glory hole, and it's just worse and worse. And people, they were going to do the Bible lecture again. They wanted to bring their tape recorders and tape it, and it was that kind of thing happened to me all the time in the class, to the point where I taught for 14 and a half years. And there were people in the class that were there from the first class, but nobody ever came to the class that didn't stay for several seasons, several semesters, because it was so darn funny.
Well,
anyway,
who was Candy Carr in your life to get you on stage?
Well, I went to Weight Watchers, which was not effective for me. I waited, I watched, nothing happened.
Yeah.
And
before you get to that, you brought up Weight Watchers. I've always wanted to know, what happens after a Weight Watchers meeting? What, do you guys go home? Do you go have a cup of coffee together?
We used to go to the Pancake House, and that was the problem. That we'd starve for the 2 or 3 days before the meeting, and then we'd go to the Pancake House and have whatever their fabulous pancake of the day. And the worst part of it is people had trouble pronouncing Hughes. I don't know why. I was in Southern California, Howard Hughes Market, but people couldn't pronounce Hughes and they couldn't spell it. And we'd go to Weight Watchers. One day we went. I gave them the name, for the table. We waited. They made an announcement. I swear, they said huge party of 4. And here are these 4 fat ladies from Weight Watchers. It was so embarrassing. It did stop us from going. I was nervous about going to Weight Watchers. I really was, because, I thought, what if I run into somebody I know? And my husband said, it's not like AA. Nobody's going to come up to you and say, oh, Carol, I had no idea you were fat,
Never noticed that you had all that weight that you were carrying.
Yes.
No, absolutely. We're going to get to your name in a little bit, because you've had some problems with that over the years. But talk about Candy Carr. She's the one that kind of convinced you to do all this.
Well, she didn't convince me. I convinced her.
Oh.
She was the Weight Watchers lecturer. And she was so funny. But her delivery and everything, I'm sitting in this lecture watching her and thinking, I now know what the people in my antiques class feel when they're watching me, because she was me. Her delivery, her timing, everything was so similar to mine.
Yeah.
So I asked her afterwards, if I could take her to lunch, I'd like to pick her brain. And we went to lunch, and she ordered a salad and then put sweet and low on the top of it. which I thought was odd. But
Yeah.
apparently, well, she lost weight at Weight Watchers. I didn't. I was trying, though. The first week, I had the highest weight loss. The second week. The first week I went, I had boots on, and I couldn't get them off.
Yeah.
And so I weighed in with boots on, and the next week I took my shoes off. So I lost a lot of weight because those boots were heavy. But after that, I wasn't so successful. But anyway, she was a comedian. She used to work at the Little Club, and she opened for Joan Rivers.
Oh, yeah.
But she's the kind of comedian that just immediately goes to the audience and talks.
Mm.
You know, she's not insulting like some people, but she everything was spontaneous off the cuff with her, which is not my style.
Yeah. Some people can work like
said,
that and some people can't. I've worked with a lot of comics.
Yeah, Jimmy Brogan. Oh my God, he's a master of it. He's
so
funny. And there was a man in the front row that was French. He told a joke in French. And he was, I love Jimmy Brogan.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not me. I'm not good at that. My motto is don't talk to the audience unless you know you can win, you know. So I don't take any chances. But I asked her, how do you become a comedian? Because I really, frankly, had no idea. I figured Johnny Carson heard you were funny, came by the house and talked to you. I had no idea how to do it. And the truth of the matter is, I've been in the business 35 years maybe. I have to add, 35 years. And I still really don't know how to do it, how to get started. I know how to be a comedian, but I don't know how to make money at it. I have 25 million views on one of my YouTube videos. Somebody's making money on that, but it's not me.
Yeah, I put all my shows on YouTube, and I don't know how people get millions of views on that thing either. We're talking to Mrs. Hughes here on the Express. Gary Allen with you. She's one of the funniest comedians around. She was Merv Griffin's favorite comedian. We're going to get to how she met Merv and everything as we move along here. But when did you finally decide you're going to make the leap? You're going to go up. I guess you went up on an amateur night or something like that, open mic night.
Sunday nights at the Improv, you go and they have a champagne bucket.
Oh,
you
yes.
Put your name on a piece of paper and get your name drawn. And Candy said, come on, I'll take, people come up to you all the time. Oh, my brother could be a comedian. My uncle was so funny he could be. No, he couldn't. There's a lot more to
Oh God!
It worked for me, but it doesn't work for very many people.
Was Bud Friedman was Bud Friedman still owning the Improv when you were there?
Of course, yes.
Bud was really good to me. He gave me my break as an MC.
He wasn't good to me.
What? Bud was one of the nicest guys around.
Well, not to me. Mark Lenow. Well,
oh
his
God,
wife
please.
Was a housewife comic, and Joanne Astro, and I liked Joanne.
Yeah.
And she's always been good to me, but they would never put me on their show.
Well,
because competition.
Mark and I never liked each other.
I worked there a lot, but I never got booked. I never got paid.
Yeah, Mark and I never liked each other very much. His little daughter who was on Knots Landing and all that other crazy stuff. I didn't really care for Mark, but I was on the softball team at the Improv the years that I was there. Will Schreiner and myself and some others. But at the time, was Howard Allen still emceeing there?
Howard is a contemporary of mine. No, he wasn't. It was Bruce Smirnoff.
Oh, Bruce was a good comedian too. Bruce was.
He's a nice man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going in though. You would, folks often hear me say this. Friends of mine. And they don't understand what I'm talking about. But, if Billy Crystal or Robin Williams or Jay Leno showed up and they were convinced to go on stage, and you didn't have to take very long to convince Robin to do anything. I mean, Robin was just brilliant. I would introduce Robin, and you'd see this little glow in his eye after about 30 seconds. Or Rick Overton would be in the audience, and he'd just look at me and he'd go, okay, Gary, it's time for you to get off the stage now. And Robin would go for an hour and a half, and every comic that was supposed to go on after that point just went home. Right. The air was out of the room.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I would go home just seeing him. I didn't want him watching me because Mary Catalano had a bit in her act that showed up in Good Morning Vietnam. And I've had bits of mine show up on the Seinfeld show, and on lots of things that it was too specific a bit for not to have been influenced by my act.
Well, believe me, I've seen many comics jacked up against that wall at the Improv. You know, the little small wall as you go into you go from the front room into the back. I saw Robin get jacked up a couple of times. Comedians saying, "You steal one more thing from me, it'll be the last thing you do on this earth."
Right.
I mean, people think comics don't steal; they steal like crazy.
Oh. And the first one to get it on television owns it. Doesn't matter who wrote it.
Yeah, that's true. That is so true. So what was it like the first time you got on stage?
People say to me,
"You
stole that joke from so-and-so." And I said, "Now I'm afraid it's the other way around."
Yeah.
But, you can't convince anybody of that. Mary Catalano sued.
I did a bunch of jokes when I started out in Fort Lauderdale. And a certain kid by the name of Brian Regan stole some of my jokes. And he's been using some of the setups and everything ever since. What was it like for you, though, the first time? Now, obviously, for 14 years doing antiques and you're a funny person in normal, but what was it like the first time you got on stage and the light is on you and it's boom, make us laugh?
Midnight at the Improv. They blew my name. I did, 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes?
Right.
Standing ovation.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I recorded it.
Yeah.
And I was so excited because Candy and I went. I was so excited. I got home and my husband had gone to bed. Of course, it's midnight. By the time I got home, it was 1:30. And I said, I went on stage. I had told him that she was going and I was going to watch. I didn't tell him I was going to do it. And I said, I went on stage. I did stand up and do you want to hear it? He goes, no, I'm asleep. I'm not going to kill him.
Oh, God.
So I had to go to some other part of the house and listen to it again myself. But I've heard it since then, and it was really embarrassingly bad. But I did get a standing ovation.
And then from there, where else did it lead?
Just open mic, open mic, open mic. And this was the 80s. And, every donut shop, every coffee shop, every bar, everything had an open mic night and contests. And I used to win the contest all the time, unless there was one darling, sweet man who was in a wheelchair. And he would sing, when you walk through a storm, hold your head up high. And
Jerry Lewis?
Very good. No, he was not a very good singer. But he was crippled. He was in a wheelchair. Yeah. And it would be he and I in the finale, and he would win. And I was always glad for him to win. It didn't matter to me. But one day I was doing a show, and he came in with some friends. And so I went over there, and I said, oh, there you are. Oh, he's beating me out in those pussies. And I went on, and how he was always a winner, and I would be second place and stuff like that. And I've never seen anybody smile as much as he was. That he was with friends, and he was able to, I told the story. But he was very, very nice, and there were a lot of nice people. And one day, one of the young comics said, oh, there's no point in doing this contest. Mrs. Hughes is here. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, you always win. Aren't you a little far along for that? Oh, maybe I am.
No, you're not. No.
So I stopped doing the contest.
Oh.
I should move on and get paid work and stop winning the $100 contest. Mm-hmm. So I went to Igby's, which was there for just several years, 5 years or more. But Jan Smith, the owner of Igby's, I went to him and told him, he said, well, what's your act like? And I told him, and he says, well, that sounds terrible, but I'll let you go up because I have to see this. And made me a regular, and then Bob Fisher at the Ice House made me a regular there. And then there's the Comedy Magic, which is, these are lovely, lovely clubs with lovely people that give you a chance and answer your questions and help you. And it's very competitive to get into those clubs because the comics that perform there are all just as nice. I met Brad Garrett there.
Yeah, Brad.
I was.
You know who Brad Garrett's grandfather is?
No.
Milton Berle.
You can't be serious.
Mm-hmm.
No kidding.
Yeah. Jay Leno performs at the Ice House to this day.
Right. Comedy Magic every Sunday.
Yeah. Didn't Bud ever put you on as a regular, or Mitzi up at the Comedy Store?
No. No. As a matter of fact, one time I was at an open mic thing, and Leno came over to me and said, not Jay Leno, but Mark Leno came over, and he says, we're losing the audience. Go up there and get him back. So he would use me to turn the audience around because he knew that I could, but he wouldn't give me a spot.
Yeah, that's Mark.
So,
Mark in spades.
Yeah.
This is Gary Allen. We're listening to Mrs. Hughes. Gary Allen with you on the Express here. We're talking about her early career in comedy. She was Merv Griffin's favorite comedian. We're going to now talk a little bit about her family and stuff. It's I tell people this all the time, and they just think, because you're funny and everything else. Oh, you just love. People ask me, why did I stop doing it when I was opening? And you have opened for a lot of people, and I have opened for a lot of people in my career. Why did you stop? And I said, because I got tired of being on the road. I got tired of coming up with jokes. I just want to be me. I'm tired of being the comic that's, hey, make me laugh. Say something funny. Do this.
Oh, God. Don't you get that? And I always say, what do you do for work? And the one guy said he was a dentist. I said, well, clean my teeth. You know, I get paid to do what I'm doing. You get paid to do what you're doing. Why should I do it for free?
People would say to me,
it's not that easy.
No. And here's the thing, and I want you to talk about this for a couple of minutes before we get into your family and the people you've worked with and everything. Talk about how hard it is. You've sort of said, as far as the improv is concerned, which, by the way, Bud was good to me because of Tubby. I never went up to do the comic strip. My buddy Bob Saget was always at the comic strip, and it seemed like Bobby's the richest struggling comic in the business, and him and Stamos, my Greek buddy. But Bob and I were at the Groundlings together, along with with Costner and Barbie Benton. You remember her?
Sure.
But Bob Saget was so. When you got to know Bob, he's so fast thinking, and most comics are. I'm a bit of a smart ass. I'm not nearly as intelligent as some of these guys that are really making a living out of it. I want to talk briefly. I was going to do this at the end, but are comedians born? And I've asked this of Jay. I've asked it of Richard Belzer. I've asked it even of Vicky, who taught comedy, Vicky Rossman. Are comedians born, or can they learn the mechanics and make a living at it?
You can learn the mechanics, but you can't. There's something about timing, and it's just something I don't think you can teach. Comedians can be great actors, but actors cannot be comedians.
No.
Unless, that's in their nature. My father, I got everything from Daddy. Daddy was funny, just really genuinely funny. Yeah. And everything was always funny in our house. And when I was raising my children, if it was funny, you could get away with almost anything. I said to them one time, I was going next door, I said, while I'm gone, wash the dishes. And when I came back, the two of them were standing there watching the dishes. And I did the dishes. They got it, they won. Yeah. If it was funny, it was that, it just worked at our house. And we had very, very, very funny children.
Yeah, for me, it was because of my uncle. And when I first got started, he used to pay people to come in and heckle me. And here's the funny thing. I said,
kind of sounds like Tubby.
Yeah, it's Tubby. I said this to Chris DePetta, and Chris said he loved you. He wanted you to get over that because a lot, of comedians cannot get over being heckled.
Right.
And I said, yeah, but I grew up in a family of 9 kids. It's kind of easy to get over it, Merv Griffin came in.
It's a great club. Great club.
Chris has been a good friend to me. He's Billy Gardell's manager and agent, etc. When did Merv Griffin come into your life, and how did that come about?
Well, our mutual friend,
Miss Vicky
Rossman.
Yeah.
I just adore her. And I think it was Mary Catalano that put me on to Vicky, but I started working for Vicky doing, it was very rarely a wonderful I love you, Vicky. I know you're listening, but she didn't book the Regal Theater or whatever, it it was working gigs that you got paid and you did your gig and you went on. And she did a gig at Lake Eola, Florida. I don't have any idea where that is. Nobody's ever heard of Lake Eola, Florida.
It's in the central part of downtown Orlando.
Right. Oh, is it? Well, in any event, I got off the airplane. I was well when I got on. When I got off the plane, I was sick as a dog. And I went over there, did my gig. It was an outdoor event. We had a really good show. And as I was leaving to go backstage to wait for people to leave so that I could go back to the hotel, Vicki came in and said, "There's a man here that would like to talk to you. He represents Merv Griffin." And, I've had people tell me they were God, and it's just, they never are.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Oh, Vicki." She goes, "No, I think he's real." I said, "Oh, Vicki, he's not, and I don't feel good." And I went out there, and he introduced himself, and, looked and talked like he really was who he said he was. But I said to him, "I'm sorry, I am just too sick to talk to anybody. I don't feel good. That took everything out of me on stage." And I said, "Could you talk to Vicki and just give me a couple of days to get feeling better?" So Vicki took care of everything. The next day I went to, I was staying with her because we're really good friends.
In the Purple House? In the Purple House?
No, way before the Purple House.
Okay.
Way before the Purple House.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vicki Rossman, who's a manager and agent. She's represented me. She has a house that's painted. Everything is purple. It's like I don't want to even see grapes.
And her hair.
Yeah, well, yeah, she has streaks through her hair now, Yeah, but I don't want to even go near grape juice after I visit with Vicki. I've had enough of that.
Anyway, she handled it all and talked to this man, and she said he really represents Merv Griffin. And so I went home to California, and I was home 2 days. The phone rang, and a man said to me, "Do you know who this is?" And all I could go was, Merv. I was so shocked. And he said, "Can you come and have lunch with me? I'd like to talk to you." Yeah. And so I did, and he said, "We love you. We'd like you to star in a show in Atlantic City, 9-month contract."
Wow.
And after I got there and did it, the third or fourth day that the show was open, he said to me, "Honey, this is show business." And he would bring all these famous people to the show, and it was so much fun. And at the end of the show, when you're taking your bow, I'm at the top of this long flight of stairs that I knew I would fall down. So they have two men wearing like harem pants, but nothing on top. And each of them take a hand and walk me down the stairs. Two half-naked, gorgeous men walking me down the stairs. I always have a Kleenex in my hand. You'll never see me without a Kleenex in my hand. I've always said, if you don't have a Kleenex in your hand, your sleeve, or your bra, you're dead. And I would have a Kleenex in my hand, and then the boy would go to hold my hand, and I'd have to quickly stick it in my bra. So I don't know what they did. One time they handed me a tampon. They just would tease me terribly.
Oh, God.
But we had so much fun. It was just the best time of my life. And after that, I worked at, I think, pretty much every place on the boardwalk.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. It was wonderful.
Well, he was, from everybody that I've ever talked to who ever knew him, I don't think I ever met him. They all said that Merv was one of the nicest employers around. He took care of his people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he really
knew everybody at that resort hotel. He knew everybody's name. He knew the guy in the laundry room. He knew everybody's name, and he would talk to them, and he would walk through that casino down into the bowels of the thing and talk to all of these people. He was incredible.
Anybody that I've ever known, whether it be in show business, politics, sports, whatever, the real pros know everybody that's connected with what they're doing from top to bottom. Hey, Bob, how you doing? Hey, how's the wife? How are the kids? You know, how's things going? I mean, they make you the center of attention for that a couple of seconds. You do something, though, that a lot of comedians nowadays, young comedians, don't do. And when I was starting out, my uncle told this to me. Leno told it to me because I told you before, Leno and I have known each other since we were about 5 or 6 years old, that when you work clean, you work everywhere. And yet today, vulgarity, I hate dirty comics, especially coming from women, vulgarity. I understand sometimes a double entendre, that's fine, but I just don't like it. Talk about that, the truth behind that. You work clean, you work everywhere.
Well, in the first place, I was very old when I started. So everybody that I was working with was younger than I. And when I would go on the road with these kids, I don't know if you can say it on the radio. In any event, he said something perfectly vulgar in the introduction for me. And they would do everything they could to prove that they were better than I was, and nobody wanted to look at this old woman. And they would not leave the middle act wouldn't leave the stage when his time was up because he hadn't gotten the big laugh. I was working with one comic, and the people in the audience were doing quarters where you flip them or something and you bet until I went on the stage, and then they stopped. So, and they would be really filthy, and it just, it disgusted me, and I think that it diminished them. Another thing, something that's to me almost worse than the vulgarity, they would go out on stage with wrinkled clothing on.
Yes.
Sure. Gabe Kaplan. I opened for Gabe Kaplan. And nobody says the F word, and everybody has to wear formal clothing. And I worked with Mac and Zach, and they were very funny, great, giant black men with tuxedos on and everything, and I'm wearing an evening gown kind of thing. Gabe Kaplan walked out there in sweatpants and a T-shirt, advertising a Mexican restaurant, and opened his act. The first word out of his mouth was the F word. And it was these people in this small town. The girls had wrist corsages on. This was an enormous deal for them.
Yeah.
And he had canceled his last appearance, and now these people have been dying to come to this show, and he showed them no respect at all.
Yeah.
I would iron clothes in the condo for the comics that were going on because I didn't want them to go on in front of me wearing their clothes wrinkled like they'd been sleeping in them.
Yeah. It's a shame.
To show the audience this is a big deal for them. It
really is
another one of those long road trips, but it's a big deal for the people that are paying the money to come see you.
Absolutely. We're listening to Mrs. Hughes here on the Express. Gary Allen with you. That's the problem with show business today. I know working in Vegas, and I know you've worked Vegas. The trouble is that if you do an afternoon show or even an early evening show, the 8 o'clock show, sometimes you'll see people in the front row with flip-flops, shorts, and a tank top on. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm being serious. I went to see Tom Jones one time. This was before I started working with him. I watched him stop a show because there was a couple in the front row in bathing suits, and he just stopped it and said, please leave. If you don't have the respect that I do for this audience, I do. Please leave, and your money will be refunded to you.
Absolutely. I have people that bring little children to a midnight show and sit them in the front row.
Yeah.
Little children.
Yeah. I mean, a midnight show is not a place you bring children under any circumstances.
No.
Let's talk a little bit about, you've been married a very long time. What's the secret to a happy and long marriage?
Oh, I don't know. I can tell you the secret to a long one, though. It's children. I swear that's the reason my husband and I are together today is the kids.
Yeah?
Neither of us wanted custody. I'm going to tell you something that I have never told.
Okay.
I'm going to explode a myth.
All right.
I talk about my son, Scooter, all the time. Scooter and his fiance. And truth of the matter is I don't have a son.
Oh.
I have daughters, but I didn't want to talk about, make fun of my daughters.
Right.
So my daughters have sons. And so the Scooter is an amalgam of my grandsons. Now, I never could own up to that because I didn't want anybody to know I was old enough to have grandsons. And Scooter was like 10 for years in my act until finally I decided that he had to, be in high school or he had to, get older. Now I talk about this, and this happened on an airplane. A young woman was pregnant. She said, you've had children, haven't you? And I said, yes. And she said, well, when can I expect my baby to move? And I said, well, it depends from child to child. Now, I thought my son, Scooter, would move when he finished high school and college, but he never did. So my daughter, Amy, who is a voiceover actress, a very talented young woman, if she could put on her resume comedian, it would help her get work in the voiceover business. And she's an on-camera actress too, and she's very, very funny, very, very funny.
What has she done that we've seen?
Nothing. Oh, Twins by Surprise and stuff like that. She was on Days of Our Lives, and I do an imitation of her on Days of Our Lives, and I turn my back to the audience and wiggle my head.
Okay.
She wasn't, you wouldn't have, no billing.
Oh, okay.
But in any event, we went to an open mic night, and I was recognized, and they asked me if I'd do a set. So I went up and I did a set, and I think I talked about Scooter. And then Amy went up a couple of people later, and she said to the audience, she said, my brother and I don't talk to one another. And it's not that we don't get along, it's just that my mother made him up. And the place just exploded with laughter. and since then, I thought, I'm just too old. I've been married 56 years, I think, 57 years. And I'm too old to still have this little kid as a child. So I have to own up to the fact that Scooter is my grandson. And it's an amalgam of all of them. But each of them think that they are personally Scooters. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were 9 in my family. And I never forget the first time my mother heard me on the radio. She calls up the radio station and she says, Gary, you have a perfect face for radio, son. I mean, she was unbelievable. If there is one thing, we're talking to Mrs. Hughes here on the Express, Gary Allen with you, and I'm certainly glad all of you have taken time to join us here tonight. If there is one thing you could change in the comedy business, if you could, what would it be?
Golly, that's a very provocative question. I don't know. I just really don't know. I wish that, I don't know. The thing I would like to change is I would like to have started before I was 40 because I have had one hell of a good time.
You have.
This has been a lot of fun, but you know something, and I have to be honest with you, I'm 70, I don't want to do the math, but I think I'm 75-ish. And I wouldn't go to see me at a show.
Oh, come on.
If I didn't know me, because I just couldn't imagine that would be funny. But it is. And
hey, look, that brings up, you brought it up. I don't really care for the reality shows, the Can You Dance and America's Next Funny, whatever. But boy, every once in a while, there's a shocker that comes on there, a person that can really sing or a comedian that can really tell some jokes. And I've been around some funny people in my life. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you hang out at the Improv long enough, or you hang out at Mitzi's place, God rest her soul, or you go to the Ice House, or you're on the road. You hang out with some pretty strong people who have more. Bob Saget has more intelligence and comedy wherefore in his pinky than some comics have running through their entire bodies. Bob is he thinks like Robin Williams. And by the way, I've said this to you off the air, and I've said it on this show. If it wasn't for Robin Williams, I never would have been with the Groundlings under any circumstances. That man was just a super genius. And he didn't even start out as a comic. He was a actor at Juilliard in New York. That's where he got started.
He's a brilliant actor too.
Oh, he was he was brilliant.
Brilliant actor.
I want to talk about some of the people you worked with. And and tell me a little bit about them. Now, you talked about Lou Rawls, the class act. By the way, there is a YouTube video of him, and I can't remember from what show it is, where he sings "You'll Never Know," and it shows him as a proctologist with a thing, and I can't remember. It was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or one of the other shows.
No, it was.
A disco ball was rolling, and he comes in. It's a funny video. We have to look it up
because it's very funny. Very funny.
He was very funny. You work with Barbara Mandrell. Talk about, because she seems to have, I loved her because I thought she was beautiful, along with Reba McEntire. I loved Reba very much. Two women that I'll never be able to go out with under any circumstance. But talk about, I mean, the women I love, believe me, I would never be able to go out with them under any circumstances. But talk about Barbara Mandrell.
She was, that's the thing that is so amazing, is that these people who are so well known and so famous and everything are so lovely. I worked with Crystal Gale, and she's got hair, everywhere, really long hair, and she came and she said, "I've had my hair trimmed a little bit. Do you think it looks a little ratty here at the bottom?" They're asking me. She was sincerely asking me. Yeah. I all of a sudden knock on the door. It's some really famous person. They say, "Do you have any hairspray?" I mean, it's like girlfriends.
Yeah.
And they just introduce you to the band and everybody, and they're all going out to eat, and they include you. They're just wonderful. They are just. I have had. Well, if I was an F-word comic, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But I was always treated like I was one of the crowd. It was very nice.
I used to hang out, because I love hot dogs, at a certain place off of La Brea called Pink's.
I love Pink's.
And back in the day,
one with sauerkraut, one with just mustard relish.
Oh, I'd get the Chicago style, and I'd also get chili on it, and then I'd have a cream soda, and then about 4 o'clock in the morning, my stomach would go, "It's time to check out." But I would run into, this is before things got, when Carol Burnett was still over at CBS Studios, which is off of Beverly, and all this other stuff. I'd see Lyle Wagner, I'd see Harvey Korman, I'd see Carol Burnett, and even Lucille Ball, who was not funny, by the way, off the air. She was not funny at all. She was very serious. These were nice people. And Ted Knight and people like that. and the best advice I ever got from any of them was, be nice. You don't need to be nasty or rude or any of this stuff. I have a friend of mine who's on a soap opera. He's been on The Young and the Restless forever and a day. He plays the Black Knight, as they call him. He plays Victor Newman. But he tells me about some of these young actors. They come in extremely schooled. And I've always said to people, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, you don't go to L.A. and get your stuff together. If you get to L.A., you better have your crap together, and you better have your contacts, because that town will eat you alive. So will Vegas. Vegas will eat you alive if you don't get there running.
When New York was the only place in of the big time cities where a lot of show business is, that you could actually make a living as a comic.
Yeah.
Starting out. L.A., the people come in there to be seen by the producers and everything. They get the show time, and they have money, so they don't need to be paid a living wage. They just are there to be showcased. And it really makes it difficult for the young comics starting out. And I was told this, I was going to be on the Merv Griffin show, and somebody said to me, "You're not ready for that. And if he sees you and you're not brilliant, that will stick in his mind."
Yeah.
And I called up and canceled it. And then years later, Merv Griffin came looking for me.
Yeah,
so
I've seen.
Don't let anybody see you until you're absolutely ready. And there are too many people ready in L.A. Get out of there. Go.
They'll knife you. They'll knife you in the back. I've seen many of the scouts that used to scout for Johnny come around, and boy, I'd see them walk out if they were disappointed. One act that you worked for that a lot of people, my audience, may not remember, but Flo and Eddy. How in the name of God did you ever connect up with the Turtles?
I have no idea. There's a booker that books music and books them, and he contacted me, and I thought, oh my God, the Turtles! I love the Turtles, and they're funny and they're talented, and you'd be amazed at the songs that were Turtles songs that have had so many covers that you wouldn't recognize it, and you can't believe that was originally a Turtles number. They're wonderful. They are wonderful, and they're just every bit as exciting to work for and to watch as they were when they were, younger and at the peak of their career. You'd never know they were older.
Yeah, we've got about eight or we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left here.
I just was such a big fan. It was fun. I really loved working with him.
We're talking to Mrs. Hughes here. Talking to Mrs. Hughes here on the Express. Gary Allen with you. You have also worked on a number of cruise ships over the years. You've traveled around the country. The one thing that always got me about cruise ships, and it turns out to be happening an awful lot because I worked on the Emerald Seas and a couple of the ships out of the port of Miami, was if you went away and came back 2 weeks later or a month later, you found the cruise director doing your jokes. I mean, Tubby would even say to me, please, they're going to steal your stuff and stuff like that. But talk about the differences.
Cruise directors are usually men, and they just aren't going to do the gynecologist joke. It's just not going to work.
No.
And nobody's as old as I am, so all my old age jokes, nobody's going to be doing them, and that's fine. But you're right. There are some notorious cruise directors, but I had a fabulous time. I thought that was sort of the sellout doing the cruise ships, and then I did it for about 7 years, and the problem and the reason I had to stop was because I had my knees operated on, and the back crew area stairs are metal, and I just knew I was going to fall, and I had to stop. Fortunately, I had a good enough reputation of Carnival Cruise Lines that they moved my cabin to the officers section, and I didn't have to deal with stairs. But even so, I was gone 4 days out of every 7, and I needed a day to recover. And I wasn't seeing. My children were all grown and had finished college or were away from home when I started doing stand-up. I wasn't. I did not neglect my family. I was a mom first and a housewife, and then my husband retired from the fire department, and he used to be gone every other day. So on the days that Daddy was home, we all behaved ourselves, and the days that Daddy wasn't home, we had a good time. But then he retired.
Yeah. You said earlier in the program,
he wants to eat morning, noon, and night. And it changed your life. So I decided to go on the road, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and it can be a rough road. And I also have heard now, if you reach a certain age as a performer, they don't want you on the ships anymore. I don't know if there's any truth to that.
Well, they've changed it now too. They have it now on one of the ships that the people can walk through, and if they want to stay and watch, or they just leave. I wouldn't like that. No, I wouldn't like that.
You have traveled the world, as I have said.
Too big.
Yeah, they are.
Too big.
Yeah. You have traveled the world, but you have said to me and to others, and you mentioned it earlier on the show, that people have a terrible problem pronouncing your last name, and I can go along with that because my legal last name is not Allen. That's my middle name. But what is the problem with the word Hughes, Hughes? I mean, it's pretty simple, but you say in France they really screwed up your name.
No, in France they can't pronounce it at all because all the letters are silent. And it's just in France, I'm Mrs. But there's one advantage, is because so many of these robocallers and people selling you things on the phone, they'll call me up and they'll say Mrs. Hughes or Mrs. Hughes or whatever. I just tell them they have the wrong number, because if they can't pronounce it, they certainly don't know me.
Right. You talk a lot about your material and stuff, and it comes from your friends and family and stuff.
But nothing in my act is fake. Everything has happened to me, or I saw it happen, or my kids said it. I do a bit about a gynecologist, and I swear to you, my gynecologist had puppets on the stirrups. Puppets. Big green, I don't know why, big green frog puppets with big bulging eyes, and they were looking right at the lily pad, if you know what I mean. I mean, somebody else said that their gynecologist had potholders on the stirrups. A comic friend of mine said, well, stirrups, would you ride a horse if you had to do it that way? You know, why stirrups are, still associate them with laying on your back with your feet in the air. And but that's a true story. It really, and it's hard to convince people that there really were puppets on the stirrups, but there were.
Right. You have
and of
said,
course, then that just grows from there. Can I tell you a Vicki Rousman story?
Sure, go ahead. We got about a couple minutes left.
Vicki Rousman told me that she'd written this joke, and she started to tell me the joke, and she said, I went to the store, I needed a new red bra, and for some reason, that's the funniest thing I ever heard in my life, because I can't imagine needing a red bra, but needing a new red bra. And I have laughed over that. Well, I don't know what the joke was, but that was funny enough for me, needing a new red bra. But that has become folklore in our house. I'll say to my daughter, I have to go to the store, and I need to get a new bra. And somebody will say, do you want to get a red one? Do you need a new red one? Vicki Rousman is she's one of the smartest women I've ever known.
Oh, yes.
I really wish I had listened to that whole joke, but just the idea of needing a new, it's like that joke about two pieces of string walk into a bar. I just think that's the funniest thing in the world, because who thought about two pieces of string walking into a bar?
Into a bar, yeah. Yeah.
I love to be able to write like that, because Monty Python.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I adore Monty Python.
You like British humor. You like British humor.
I do.
I loved Dave Allen, the two Ronnies. Of course, I used to see the European versions of Benny Hill.
Yeah, that's funny. But it was the stuff they showed here wasn't funny.
No, it was watered down. Yeah, it was watered down.
Yeah, but it was pretty raunchy, some of it, but it was very funny.
Everybody that worked for him absolutely adored him. The two Ronnies, the same thing. Dave Allen, the same thing. I have here cassettes, and I have no way of transferring them anymore, of Derek and Clives, which is Dudley Moore and Peter Cook, drunk as a skunk on the BBC. Oh, it would just, oh my God, you can't even talk about it on decent radio anymore. It's just
Mrs.
unbelievable.
Brown?
Yeah. We have been talking to Mrs.
Brown's
Hughes here
voice.
on the Express. If you want to get more information about Mrs. Hughes, go to mrshughes.com. That's HUGHES.com. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time, Mrs. Hughes, to join us here on the Express. It has really been a blast to have you on.
I have enjoyed this so much. You're really fun to talk to. We'll have to do it sometime, maybe when we're not on the radio.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it separately. We'll do it without the radio being on. But I just wanted to thank you so much. And for all of you out there, go to GaryAllenTalkShow.com. As soon as my webmaster gets it all on there, you'll find out about the new radio stations that this show is on, and some other things that are coming up in the not too distant future. And of course, don't forget AMFM247.com on Thursday mornings at 6 a.m. and Diversity Broadcast Network at 6 p.m. on 7 p.m. on Thursday evenings. And I just want to thank all of you so much for taking the time to join us here on the Express. Until next time, Gary Allen, take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.